In today's episode, during listener Q&A, we'll discuss what to do when you need new floors for your old house.
And later, as part of our ongoing Young Tradesperson Series, Stacy and I chat with window restorer and all-around nice guy Andrew Wing.
But first, I'm Stacy Grinsfelder.
And I'm Daniel Cantor.
This is True Tales from Old Houses, episode 105. Hey, Daniel.
Hello, how are you, Stacy Grinsfelder?
I am very good. It is cold here. Is it cold there?
It really hit like yesterday. It's freezing. There was frost on my windshield this morning.
Millie and I traipsed through all of the frosty leaves on our walk this morning, and I think we're going to get a few snow flurries this afternoon even.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's the Nights of Frost time of year.
The Nights of Frost.
That's a deep True Tales cut, but I'll never forget.
No, the Nights of Frost are upon us, yes. Well, we have a great episode today, but before we launch into it, I do want to say thank you to our Season 10 sponsors, our very favorite, The Craftsman Store, and our other very favorite, Sutherland Wells.
Thank you to our favorites. Got some announcements?
I do. First, I do want to say we have just a few more episodes before we wrap up the Young Tradesperson Series. We are fully booked for that, and we'll also wrap our deep dive into wood floor restoration. So if you still have questions about wood flooring, please do submit those right away through the contact form on True Tales from Old Houses at the website. And if you've already submitted a question, it's there. We're getting to it.
I have a quick one. Hopefully quick.
Yeah, go for it. Quick. I love it when you say quick.
It's never true. The apple of my eye land bank house 111111 Downs is still up for sale. We are still seeking just that amazing person that I know is going to come in and want to restore this house and maybe hopefully live in it. And so I have a lot of faith that that's going to happen. This also comes with a thank you to our friends at Cheap Old Houses, Ethan and Elizabeth, and their whole team. I posted about the house yesterday on Instagram, and they immediately jumped on it, and we were texting within a few hours, and then they had it posted. And so that is just so huge for us in terms of just getting this thing out there and letting people know that it exists. And I really think it's going to make an impact. So super, super grateful to them. And on top of that, also Cheap Old Houses related, I did just want to say real fast, their book came out and my house is in it. A lot of my friends' houses are in it, or people I like to think are my friends, but are really just people that don't know me on Instagram. But, I know them and their houses intimately. And so, pick up the book. It's beautiful. I quite liked my little section, but everyone's houses look so great and it's well written, and it was a joy to be a part of, and it's very cool to see the final product.
The book is so beautiful. You're absolutely right. And my house is not in it because, as I like to say, it's stupid expensive, not a cheap old house. But I enjoy the book very much. It's sitting on my coffee table right now, and we'll put a link to that book right in the show notes.
Oh, thank you. Awesome.
You're welcome. Another link I'm going to put in the show notes is to some leftover merchandise that we have. There are a couple types of sweatshirts. We still have some aprons, and everything's ready for immediate shipping. So if you want to buy a gift for the holidays or just a little something for yourself, there are a few items still up there. I can't promise that we're going to have the exact color and the size that you want, but everything that we have is there at truetalesfromoldhouses.com/merch. And that link, again, right in the show notes.
And lastly, we would just love to remind you once again to please subscribe and leave a rating or review for this podcast in your podcasting app of choice. We love to see ratings and reviews come in. It makes us feel extremely special, and it helps boost us in the rankings, get more people listening to this show, and that's all we want, world domination.
World domination and warm fuzzies. Don't forget the warm fuzzies.
Mostly warm fuzzies.
Daniel, do you have any project updates?
Oh boy. Not terribly exciting ones. The countertops at the duplex got templated first thing this morning at 7 a.m. So that was fun.
Bright and early.
I was their first stop, apparently. So hopefully the turnaround is fast. They did tell me 4 weeks, which is so long for countertops, but maybe a miracle will happen and it'll be the standard 7 to 10 days. So that's good. And then I did have a really funny thing that happened. It's not a project update, but can I tell you about it?
Yeah, definitely.
Over the weekend, Brad was here and we took a little drive up to Hudson to see a couple stores that we hadn't been to. And on the way up, we passed this really beautiful store that I had never seen. So I did this real quick U-turn, and it's called Quittner Home, Quittner. And the owners are just these absolutely lovely people who've been running this business. They're designers. They do new production lighting. They also sell antiques. Anyway, that is not the point of the story, but they were so nice. And so we basically stood there and talked to the owner of the store for like 2 hours because
you're a talker.
A little bit. So we talked her ear off, and toward the end of the conversation, she's like, you guys should come back later because we're having this like cocktail party. And I don't really know who's coming, but I know that the Brownstone boys are coming and like a bunch of old housey people. And we're like, oh, okay, cool.
And the Brownstone boys, let me interject. The Brownstone boys are on Instagram.
Yes. So at Brownstone Boys on Instagram, they have tons of followers. They rehab houses primarily in Brooklyn and are lovely people. They have also done an episode of In With the Old on Magnolia.
We should have them here sometime, maybe.
Absolutely. They are so lovely. So anyway, so we go back and I'm like, we're not really even invited to this thing, but I guess we kind of were. So we go, and first people I see are Susan and Will Branson. And I'm like, okay, we're here. Everything's fine. And then I see the Barry and Jordan from Brownstone Boys, and they were lovely. And I was flattered, like recognized me before I had to be like, hi, I follow you. And so I'm talking to them, and this woman is standing there, and I introduce myself, and she goes, oh, I recognize your voice from the podcast.
Oh, how funny.
Yes. So Kate Wood, it was an absolute pleasure to meet you. I hope you're still listening. And she is at Worth Preserving on Instagram, and she's a historic preservation expert consultant. She does a lot of work with like historic tax credit stuff, and is an awesome person. We should have her on the show at some point, please. But anyway, it was just hilarious to be
recognized for your voice.
I mean, that is not shocking, but specifically for the podcast made me very happy. I was like, yes.
That is really good. Yeah. I have a friend, I didn't ask him if I could share the story, so I'm not going to say who it is, but he listens to the podcast with his son, and his son is 11, I think. Oh gosh, I could be wrong, but I think he's 11. Anyway, when you join the podcast, my friend was getting used to the fact that this was a 2-person podcast, right? And so he would listen to it in the car with his son all the time. And then his son said to his dad, I really like his voice. So just so you know, you were concerned about your voice,
person.
But
thank you.
Well, you were recognized by your voice, and one person for sure likes your voice. So you are a valuable asset here to True Tales from Old Houses.
You know, I never saw this coming, but thank you to whoever can stand this auditory experience. Anyway, thank you, Stacy. Tell me about your sleeping porch.
All right. The sleeping porch is happening, and that's really all I'm going to talk about today. We'll catch up on everything else on the next mini. But, I only had about 3 days before the weather turned to winter around here, and I needed to replace some wood on the sill. I needed to replace pillar bases, epoxy paint, all these things with 3 warm days. And it was
goodness.
A crush. It was a crush of activity. I did a little bit of crying. I did a little bit of working. I did a little bit of feeling sorry for myself. And then I got the job done. So at this stage right now, all the wood is replaced. It's everything that needed everything that needed epoxy is complete. I also did all of my oil primer with my Clarabelle's combination, which I love, the secret sauce, as I've started to call it. And so all of the wood is protected, and all I really have to wait for is a decent day in the 40s, and then I can slap some paint on everything that doesn't have paint on it. I checked the minimum temperature required for the type of paint that I used. Only has to be 40 degrees. But as of now, everything's protected. The windows were in really bad shape, so they have to be restored anyway. They're pretty easy 1/1s, but I can't put them up yet until that's done. But everything is good to go when those are done. So I feel a sense of relief.
That is impressive.
It was hard. It was probably one of the hardest things I had ever done. And, working alone is, well, because you work alone. But
I do know intimately.
Yeah, you just have to kind of constantly make decisions and pivot when something doesn't work and go out and buy something. Or what I'm particularly proud of that I wanted to share with you is that I used mostly scrap for this project. And I channeled my inner Daniel Cantor, and it was attractive. And I say that very facetiously. It was pretty rough looking before all the paint and primer went on.
Hey, all that matters is how it looks at the end and holds up over time, all that stuff. But, it's okay when
Right.
things are a little funky under the hood. Congratulations. That's very good.
Thank you. Thank you. Probably the fastest I've ever worked on anything. So there's another reason to give myself a little pat on the back. I guess the pressure worked.
I'm very impressed. Very good.
All right. Well, we'll talk about more project updates and things on next week's minisode, but let's take a quick break, okay?
Okay.
All right. Listener Q&A is up next. As we all know, all good things must come to an end. So during Q&A today, I thought we could talk about some do's and don'ts for choosing new flooring for your old house.
When you said all good things must come to an end, I'm like, I'm getting kicked off the podcast right now.
You're getting fired. We need to
this
talk.
This always happens. Okay.
No, you're safe.
I like this topic. There's a lot there. Okay. Do's and don'ts for choosing new flooring for your old house.
I have not had a ton of experience with this because I have lucked out in all of the houses that I've lived in that have had hardwood flooring that there was plenty there to refinish. But on occasion, your floor, every time you sand it, you're sanding away the wood and that doesn't grow back.
Right. It's not a fingernail.
No. So that's what we mean by all good things must come to an end. So I guess, why don't you, I always throw it back to you and say, why don't you start, Daniel?
It's because it doesn't matter what it is. I have 4,000 opinions about it.
Yes. Let's start with your opinions and then I'll form mine once I've heard yours. Go for it.
Well, so we will talk in probably next episode about ways that you can kind of mitigate damage to floors in refinishing processes. But this is about, I think, when you're already at the point where these floors got to go. Unfortunately, hardwood floors do have a lifespan.
So there are a couple of ways that I know that hardwood flooring is at its end, and that is that the gaps between them start to get really much wider than they were. When hardwood was laid, it was butted up pretty close together with a little bit of room for expansion and contraction. The more you sand, the closer you get to the tongue and groove, and those gaps start getting farther apart. That's how you know, in some ways, that you're getting really close to the tongue and the groove. And the other way that I know is that maybe you'll even see exposed nail heads. When you've sanded too far, then you start to see those nail heads, and you know that you're kind of at the end. Those are the two ways that I am familiar. What am I missing?
I think that's basically right. And I guess the only other thing I can think of is like parquet floors, or often like Victorian houses will have parquet style or inlay around the border and stuff. Those generally are very, very thin wood. So they don't have tons of refinishing cycles in them before they're toast. And those will start to just kind of lift and come up. Yes.
And I thought of one more. If you have certain wear patterns, down a hall or something, or when there's hardwood flooring that is a transition into another space that doesn't have hardwood flooring, sometimes that will pit and wear down into a deep, deep groove. And even if you were to sand, you would not hit that grooved area. Your sander would just bump over the high parts. So that might not necessarily be a complete overhaul. You might not need a completely new floor, but you may need a patch there in that section.
Yeah. So I think that is a very important thing to recognize. Patching is valuable. So, sometimes in land bank houses or any houses, floors may have been damaged by water. They'll buckle. Usually those floors can be repaired. So a lot of people look at them and think, oh, this needs to go. And actually you need to take out the buckled boards and feather in new ones, or even rip down the ones that are buckled and just make everything fit again, and they should be fine. But the point of this was when you really just need new floors. And that is a big investment and a big choice for your old house. So I think for my money, the best thing you can do is stick with natural materials. I think that is overwhelmingly true in pretty much everything with old houses. Within that, though, there are a lot of options now. And so I think a great strategy for getting wood floors is to try to find them salvaged. So a lot of times, either like professional salvage pickers, if a house is being demolished, a lot of times they will come in and rip out all of the floors and save them, and they're beautiful. So the benefit there is, number one, you're more likely to get very long lengths. And that to me is always the big difference between new floors and old floors, is the length of the boards. So old houses almost always have these really long boards, 14, 16 feet. Newer hardwood flooring, especially more inexpensive hardwood flooring, is going to come varying length. And the shortest lengths will be like a foot, and the longest ones will be like 5 or 6 feet, maybe. And it gives you that very kind of choppy look. So for salvage, I would say salvage shops, Facebook Marketplace, secondhand markets, keep an eye out. I have about 300 square feet of flooring from a factory sitting in my garage that will be going in my kitchen because it happens to match the rest of the flooring in my house. So it can be done.
I want to say something about salvage too, because sometimes we think, oh, this is where I live and there's no salvage here. And granted, not everybody can rent a truck and go somewhere else and bring salvage home. But I do want to encourage people to look for salvage outside of their area. And if it is a possibility for you to get to a different location, rent a truck or a trailer and bring salvage wood home, then that could be a really good way to get wood from one part of the country to another part of the country. Because I know out east we have tons of salvage, but in other parts of the country, that is not the case. I guess think outside the box when it comes to picking it up or getting it to your house.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's already in a truck, so they'll just bring it to you. Lots of ways salvage can make your dreams come true. And probably goes without saying, but the cost per square foot is generally going to be quite low in comparison to brand new material. The caveat being, you'll probably have to have it refinished after it goes down, so it'll balance out.
There are always trade-offs.
Exactly.
But sometimes you just need new. So what are we talking about when you need new wood? You have some experience with that, Daniel.
I have some experience with that. So I would say with new solid wood floors, you'll have kind of two categories: unfinished, just raw wood, or pre-finished, which comes with the polyurethane coating on it. I think in old houses, unfinished floors that are finished on site are just the right choice aesthetically. Pre-finished floors generally are kind of those shorter lengths. The finish is really, really tough. So I know people who have put them in, and then when they want to get them refinished, they'll have the refinishers run screaming because they're like, no, those things just eat up our sanders. The finish is crazy. And the thing that I have a hard time with them is that they usually have a little bevel at the joint between the boards.
Oh, yeah. I don't like that.
I don't like it. And it's sort of funny to me that now I feel like that is being replicated in fake materials like vinyl wood flooring, that it absolutely doesn't need to be there, but that's what people aesthetically think wood floors are supposed to look like, I guess. It's very strange to me. So for those reasons, I like unfinished. Within that, you will have your options.
All right, but let me stop you, because when you have unfinished, then of course that means you can stain it and seal it in the way you want. And we've talked about different finishes here. We've talked about oil polys and water polys and tung oil, and
we mentioned shellac one time.
Yeah, hard wax coatings, shellac. I mean, they're all the things that you get to choose yourself if you buy unfinished for your house.
Exactly. Then within the world of unfinished flooring, I guess both, but let's focus on unfinished flooring for a second. You'll have options of wood species and kind of quality. So lower quality but unfinished hardwood flooring can be obtained from big box stores. It is almost always red oak. It is almost always varying lengths. So you'll end up with a pretty choppy looking floor, which can be okay in a smaller space. But if it's a big living room, to me, never looks right in an old house. However, it is oak and it is easy to come by. In my region, fir flooring is very common in these old houses. And so that's what I used at the cottage. And part of the reason that I used it was because I could get 16-foot lengths. It's very commonly used for porches here too. So, you don't want joints in porch floors. To me, it gave a really authentic look and it was a good price point. And then, of course, the more you want to spend, the nicer you can get. So common floor materials, obviously white and red oak, very common in this country. Maple, very common in certain parts of this country. Then if you're real fancy, you got your mahogany, chestnut. I don't know. I feel like that sort of encapsulates your wood options.
So all of those things that you've talked about thus far, those are options that you would have to nail down. Is that correct?
That is correct. I believe some pre-finished hardwoods can be installed either floating or like with adhesive. I don't actually know.
Okay, and so floating floors, let me explain that real quick. Basically, a floating floor is exactly what it sounds like. There's oftentimes an underlayment. The floor is laid directly on top of that underlayment, and then it floats, expands, and contracts on the existing floor. It's not nailed down or adhered down with some sort of adhesive. Did I explain that correctly?
I think that's exactly right. Yeah. So I think we only bring that up really because there are some situations, I think, where either you can't do a nail down. For instance, if you're going over like a concrete slab or something that someone's used a bunch of like self-leveling concrete over, we've seen all kinds of crazy stuff. Or in the case that maybe you need something to get you through the next few years till you have your dream floors or whatever. And there are good floating options that are low cost, that are very easy to DIY, that can fulfill that function and will not damage whatever's underneath. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I think that follows right in line with sort of a first do no harm sort of doctor's approach to old houses, in which you choose something that can be undone and go back to a product that is more in line with the historic nature of your house. So I think it's appropriate to mention that.
Yeah. So like I've thought about it for in my kitchen. Right now I have plywood subfloors that I slapped a coat of stain on and then a coat of polyurethane on. And that's what I've been living with for like 5 years. And had I known it was going to be 5 years, I would have spent the $2 a square foot to just get like click lock.
Oof.
It goes down in a day. I know, but like it would have kept my kitchen a lot cleaner the last several years. And it we got to do things sometimes we don't love doing to just sort of make it work for now, because these are lifetime projects often. So,
yeah, you said it. Well, I think we about covered that today. Thank you for your insights. I don't know that I added a whole lot to that conversation, but I'm here to clarify.
Well, thank you for letting me just go on and on about wood floors.
All right. Well, we need to take a break, Daniel.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's do it. True Tales from Old Houses is supported by The Craftsman Store, another excellent resource from Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog. The Craftsman Store is your go-to place for old house tools and supplies.
Once again, our friend Scott has taken the hassle out of tracking down all the specialized old house supplies that we need and put them all in one place for us. It is a cozy and very valuable online hardware store full of books, tools, and replacement parts.
One of the things I love the most about Scott and his company is that he's always innovating and creating new products for window restoration in old houses. He's writing books. He has his own line of glazing putty. He has specialized window restoration supplies. He has an affordable infrared paint remover. He's constantly looking for ways to make our lives as old house DIYers easier. He runs a top-notch small business. The customer service is a human, and they ship really fast.
So from window restoration to plaster repair, they have everything you need to do the job like a pro. Check it out today at thecraftsmanstore.com and save 10% on your orders if you use the code TrueTales.
True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by Sutherland Wells. All of Sutherland Wells products are handcrafted in Providence, Rhode Island, with the highest quality, sustainably grown tung oil. Tung oil, native to China, has been used for centuries as a durable finish for wood, metal, and stone.
We tell you all the time, we'll tell you again, unlike polyurethane, tung oil finish penetrates the surface of the wood, so it flexes and contracts as conditions change, which makes it the perfect pre-finish or protectant for everything from fine furniture to window sash and sills.
I'll be using Murdoch's tung oil on the unpainted wainscoting in our main bathroom. I've used Millie's, I've used Clarabelle's, I've used Slicky Wicky. I love them all. And Sutherland Wells has an entire product line for whatever you're working on right now. Siding, hardwood floors, furniture restoration, cutting boards, you name it.
To learn more about the complete product line, visit Sutherland Wells, that's WELLES, sutherlandwells.com. And to save 10% on your first order, use the coupon code TRUETALES.
Our guest today is Andrew Wing. Many of us first became acquainted with Andrew 3 years ago through Laine and Kevin Barry of our Restoration Nation. Andrew was restoring the windows of a house dubbed Louise when tragedy struck, but we'll let him tell the story.
My name is Andrew Wing. I'm from Brevard, North Carolina. Currently live in a tiny house in Mills River, North Carolina.
Welcome, Andrew.
Hey, Andrew, nice to meet you.
Yeah, you as well.
Well, Andrew, we're happy to have you here. You are part of an ongoing season where we get to talk to young tradespeople. And I assure you that I mean young in the best sort of way, because what we're looking for are to talk to people who chose the trades. This is what they chose from an earlier age, because a lot of times we've talked to people over the past seasons who have had 2 or 3 careers and then they choose the trades. And I'm interested in talking to someone like you who started from the beginning. So I guess I would like to hear that first. How long have you been doing this job?
Yeah, so I have my own business, of course. It's saving old windows. And I've been doing that it's actually 3 years this August. Wow.
Congrats.
For 3 years. Thank you. But before that, I started the restoration trade in 2018. I met a guy in Asheville, North Carolina, and worked with him for about a year and a half or 2 years. And then I got pulled away from that back to my former job, which was in the bicycle industry. But I always kind of felt like something was missing, and I just felt called back to restoration. So I can get into the deeper story of what led me to start my business if you want me to.
Sure, I'd love to hear it.
I know you are already familiar with the situation that happened in Georgia. So there was a house in Georgia, Louisville, Georgia, that was for sale, and a couple from Arkansas bought it, Laine and Kevin Barry. And I kind of had a personal connection with the house just because the moment that I saw it, it really just invoked something in me, and I knew I had to see it in person. So I just reached out to them through Instagram and actually got a message back, which was awesome. So I planned to go down there, meet them, photograph the house for them, and just get a sense of what the house was like. I wasn't intending at all to be like, hey, I can restore these windows for you.
All right, I want to stop you really quick just because I think I want to just address the fact that Laine and Kevin Barry are the duo behind our Restoration Nation. They've been on this show before, and Laine's been on twice. So that's some context, but go ahead. Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's fine. Met with them down there, saw the house, and we just kind of got to talking about things. Like I was curious about their plans for restoration of the house, and like they were obviously the windows were a big highlight of this house, and they were like, "Well, we don't know what we're going to do about the windows." So I was like, "Well, I have restored windows in the past. I'm not currently doing it, but it's something that could be done." And then they're like, "Well, can you do it?" And I didn't say yes right away. I was just kind of like, "Well, maybe." But we got to talking, and one thing led to another, and I agreed to come back down at another time and like actually do a full inspection of the windows and just see if it was something that I could do. Eventually, we came to an agreement, and I basically started my business. I mean, it wasn't official at the time. I was kind of just working as a glorified handyman or whatever, and went down there, actually moved. Like I quit my job, gave up everything else that I was doing at the time, and just like relocated down there for a couple months and just went into it. Didn't really know. I knew what I was doing. Like I know how to restore windows at that point. Like I'd been doing it for over 2 years, but those windows were just a whole nother, ball game, especially the massive, walkout box head windows onto the porch. And of course, with everything that happened with that house, the fire and the support afterwards towards not only myself, but like Laine and Kevin and everybody else involved, that was what really inspired me to like not give up and just keep doing this, because I could have easily just, all right, I lost all my tools, didn't make any money, but all that was replaced, all that was compensated. So at that point, knowing the community that was behind us and just behind the restoration industry, that just really inspired me to continue.
Yeah, let's pause for just a second again to just explain that that house was indeed Louise. There was a large tree beside it that got struck by lightning, which in turn set poor Louise ablaze. And all of your work was destroyed. The entire house was destroyed. All of your tools were burned, if I recall correctly. And yeah, I can understand why you would have considered giving up, because that is a great big hit right at the start of a business, for sure.
It was unfortunate too, because I had just started the work on the second floor and I'd taken a lot of the windows out. Now, my work didn't really affect the fire because most of those windows didn't have glass in them at that point anyway, so air was going to get through no matter what. But I had left all of my tools up there. Like, usually I don't do that. I always take everything with me, at least my expensive stuff. But I left everything there. I think the only thing that I had in my car were a couple, small hand tools. But my really nice Festool standard and dust extractor, those were both completely destroyed. All of my really specialized tools that I use were just all gone. After that happened, after the fire, after things became more clear of what was going on, actually, John Rogers, who you've had on the show as well, Phoenix Preservation, I didn't even ask him to do this. I didn't know him very well. I think we talked a couple times via social media, but he organized like not a GoFundMe. I'll get to that in a second, but he reached out to everybody else that he knows in the window restoration industry specifically, and just put my story out there. It was like, hey, if you guys can help contribute some tools, that would be awesome to help Andrew out. And basically all of my tools that were lost were covered either monetarily or people just bought stuff and sent it to me within like 2 or 3 weeks. So,
Wow.
Wow. This community is amazing.
yeah, my mind was blown. I was like, why are these people doing this? Like, they don't know me. I didn't feel like I deserved it.
You did, and you do.
After all that, too, Kelly Gomez with the Forgotten South, she organized a GoFundMe for me, and that actually helped recuperate the loss from not being able to finish the work. So that was tremendous. I mean, that was a blessing for sure. But after that, I was like, I can't give this up now. Like, I've got to keep going. And I had the passion, I had the drive. I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it right. So I started an LLC, got all my legal stuff figured out, got insurance, bought a few more tools, got a temporary shop space. Well, actually, when I was working for the Willie House, I was actually working on my grandparents' property. They have a covered carport that they used to park their camper under that was empty. So I was actually working under that on their windows. And then shortly after I finished that up, I acquired a temporary shop space that I was in for a couple of months. And, one thing led to another. And eventually now I'm in a 1,500 square foot space in a brand new building that I lease. That's also been a blessing, because if I had not found that, I was going to be struggling with being able to do the work, because I've obviously got a lot more volume of work coming in. I need a large space to be able to perform this work. And having a dedicated space is really what makes it feasible to do, economically, and just for my sanity, not having to trip over everything like I was in smaller spaces. So yeah, it's a work in progress. Some days I feel like giving up, but I'm not going to.
It's a pretty amazing story. I mean, I really like hearing that story because I think as an audience member on Instagram, I think a lot of listeners and myself will recall, seeing the house go up in flames and how completely horrifying it was and really, really sad. And so I think that house and that project was able to have this legacy of not only you starting this business, but also bringing all these people together to support you and the other tradespeople that, lost stuff. That's really pretty special. Good job, Louise.
As sad as that whole situation was, you're right. It really brought so many people together. There's still people to this day that discover me on Instagram. They're like, oh my gosh, you're the guy that worked on Louise. And I'm like, it brings joy. Even though the house is gone, the memory still lives on, and the people that house brought together is the important part. The legacy is still there. People will remember. And I don't want to talk about the fire too much because I know that's been covered, but I'll just say, for my personal experience, I was the last person to walk through Louise. I walked out that door at 5 p.m., went to the grocery store, came back through and I saw the smoke at the end of the street.
Mm.
And it didn't really click at the moment of what was going on. There had been a storm, like a really quick flash storm that came through the town, and there's some really severe lightning. Like there were several other areas in town that got hit by lightning. I think the post office even had a tree fall on part of it. It didn't really destroy it, but it did damage it a bit. But I was coming back and I just like stop and I see the house, Louise. There's flames that's coming out of the windows that I was just working in, and I'm like the first person there on scene. There's another person pulling up, and I'm just like standing there, like just looking in disbelief at what's happening. So that was just a really
Wow.
powerful, emotional moment for me of just like, I'm looking at it, but I'm not understanding what's happening. And like my first thought was, well, what can I do to stop it?
Right, right. How do we put this out? Sure.
Yeah, at that point, a police officer showed up and like he saw me and he's like, don't even think about it. But that was sort of my involvement. Then I had to like break the news to Laine and call her on her and Kevin's anniversary of all things. So that was really hard. And just like talking to her on the phone while it's happening, explaining, not really explaining it well because I didn't even have the words. But yeah,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That sounds very difficult. That was definitely probably about the hardest situation you could have ever been in a first job.
yeah, that was my first independent thing. Some people probably don't realize that, but yeah, that was my first experience to self-employment and the restoration business. Another little known fact is I had proposed to my now wife, Rebecca, like right before I decided to take the job and move to Georgia. So I was like, all right, marry me. See you later. I was going to say, so she was like dealing with all of the wedding planning. I was helping, but I couldn't be there as much because I would come back on some weekends, but I would usually work like a month or so and then come back like on a weekend a couple times. That was personally tough.
Sure.
Fast forward and you have started your business. Luckily, all of your tools and things are restored to you. You're working out of North Carolina, and you have a space. Do you have employees? Like, how is the business sort of developed? I guess I'm curious about.
After all that, like I started to, I did get a lot of like notoriety and recognition from like people finding me on Instagram because of Kevin and Laine, because of our Restoration Nation. That was terrific. I don't think I could have built the following that I have without that. So like I don't advertise or anything. Like it's all word of mouth. And I've just made different connections with different people. And the restoration community in general is just very tight knit. If John Rogers knows I'm in North Carolina and he gets an inquiry from someone, he's going to be like, "Oh, go talk to Andrew," and vice versa. If I know someone in another state, somewhere else, and I'm like, "Okay, these people are closer to you. They can probably help you before I can," and maybe it's so far that I can't. Just the word of mouth kind of like development of people coming to me, that was something I didn't expect. And I also didn't expect the demand. I knew, there's hundreds of thousands of old houses and there's millions of windows. I think Steve Quillian actually did a calculation. I don't remember it exactly, but there was like something like it would take a team of like 300 people. I'm probably getting it wrong, but it'd take like a team of 300 people like 200 years to get through all the work. Something like that.
I don't remember either, but I do remember it was like, there's no way we're going to get to it as professionals. So we've got to get a bunch of DIYers and homeowners to do their own work as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually something else like in the future, when I have more time and more freedom, I want to get into educating homeowners and doing workshops and just like, I'd like to travel around to different small towns, historic small towns, and like just do workshops and teach people.
I smell a collaboration.
Yeah.
I know. I was going to say, you're singing my song here, Andrew, because I'm actually at that stage of my life where that is my next step. So that's exciting. That's great. So Daniel wanted to move forward, but I want to move way back. I want to go all the way back.
That's where I was going next too.
You were going backwards after you went forwards. Okay, go ahead.
And Daniel, to answer your question, right now I don't have any employees. That's something that I kind of go back and forth on. Like I want to be able to take on work that only I can handle. Although at the current moment I have way more work than I can handle, and that's difficult as well. But I'm not ready yet. I'm not there mentally, financially to be able to take on a full-time employee. I've had people help part-time. Like I have a couple friends that can help here and there if I need it. My father, my wife, she's the number one employee because she doesn't even get paid.
She does. You get paid together.
Yes, exactly. But on this current project I'm working on, this historic post office in Anderson, South Carolina, the windows are massive, and she's helped clean 90% of that glass, which has been tremendous because I hate cleaning glass, and it's something that I'm really slow at because I just don't like doing it. And she likes detail stuff like that. Like I like detail stuff when it comes to repairs and painting and glazing, but I just when it comes to glass cleaning, it's just not. I check out. Having her, that's been great. But I think in the future, if I can get there, I might have one or two people down the road. But that's probably like a 3 to 5 year thing. It's not something immediate.
So impressive. Okay, Stacy, go all the way back in time.
All right, so I'm going back. I'm going back in our time machine, and I would like to know what other careers you considered. Like when you were a kid or you were high school or whatever, and you were thinking, "Oh, what do I want to do with my life?" What were you thinking at that time?
I mean, when I was like 5, police officer, firefighter, of course.
Sure, good, classic. They're classics.
Yeah.
A pilot, perhaps.
My dad was when I was really young, he drove trucks for a grading company locally. So I like wanted to be a truck driver at one point. And then my father is like really kind of who's led my interest in buildings and construction because he started a construction company when I was probably about 7 or 8, and he's been doing it ever since. So he's like, I don't know, 15, 20 years into it now. And he also works alone. So I think that's kind of just like I don't know, that's an us thing. Like we just like to work by ourselves. But I knew I didn't want to build new buildings. When I was in high school, I actually really wanted to pursue architecture. That was something that I was really passionate about, or engineering, but like structural engineering. But I wasn't like a traditional student. Like I just really didn't, yeah, I am intelligent, but I just don't learn the same way in school. So school was always kind of a struggle for me. I like to learn things myself, doing them hands on. I remember like doing all the CAD stuff and like the architecture software, and like the teacher was teaching me how to do it, but then I just like figured it out on my own, and then I was actually showing her how to do things because we got a new program my senior year. So my entire senior year in that class I just spent in there writing notes for her, basically teaching her how to do the software so she could teach the other students.
Is this high school or college?
That was high school.
Oh my gosh. You're doing CAD in high school? The kids are so advanced.
Our school had a really cool program as far as that goes.
That's amazing.
I was grateful for that. And another thing I thought about besides architecture was graphic design. And that's still something like maybe in the future I might do as a side hustle, just designing logos. I don't really do website stuff. Like I don't even have a website 3 years later for my business or a logo. That's because I'm so busy. So stuff like that, like anything sort of like design and graphical wise was always interesting to me, but also the hands-on aspect. So like with architecture, I always like to hand draw stuff, and I still do occasionally. Those were kind of the things I was thinking about. And then out of high school, I had a series of jobs, like, typical grocery store job as a high school student. And then I worked for a friend's parents' landscaping company. And then I did work with my dad and off and on when he needed it while he was doing construction work. So I went to community college for a period of time, and I was going through a construction management program because that's what I thought I wanted to do, was just to be a project manager. But it just, again, it wasn't for me. It wasn't hands-on enough, and it was just for me, it was boring. And I thought about the different companies I could work for. And at that time, I didn't even really think about, okay, I could do this for a historic preservation company. That wasn't a thought. I was like, okay, if I get this job, I have to go straight into like a general contractor or a commercial contractor and just work on new stuff. So that wasn't even a thought in the back of my mind. I wish I had that thought because I could have pursued that. But historic preservation and the trades in that respect weren't really a thought in my mind until much later, surprisingly. Like I always had a passion for historic buildings. I just wasn't sure how I fit into that. So I actually met the guy in Asheville, Michael Logan. He owns Logan Restoration and Contracting. I met him through the Preservation Society in Asheville. I did some volunteer work for them, mostly photography, and just got connected with him. And it sounded like a cool opportunity. He was looking for help, and I just kind of jumped into that, and it clicked with me because I'm already like highly detail oriented. Like just the aspect of like stripping all the paint off and getting it perfectly clean, bare wood, then going back and like, glazing, painting, that all really clicked with me because it was stuff that I could focus on and hone in my skills.
Well, and I should clarify that, Andrew, you and I've met before. We met in Florida. And what my takeaway from someone like you is that you like to move. You like to be doing things, like you said, hands-on. You would rather not be sitting around pushing paper, managing things, that kind of thing. You are a mover and a shaker. And of course, me as a podcast host, I think I made you sit still for an hour and a half. And I think you and a bunch of other people who are very much like you were practically unglued by that point. So I felt terrible about that. But we got a lot of good information discussed at that. And I think I really set in a bonus episode, I don't know, 2 seasons ago or something like that. But so my question to you now would be like, do you find this career rewarding? Do you feel really good about what you do?
Most days, yes. Right now, I'm just kind of going through a project that I'm not going to say much about it in case someone listens, but it's something that I was hopeful about at the beginning, but I've never dealt with a commercial project before. So there's obviously more that goes into that, especially with the planning, the financial side of things, the legal side of things that I wasn't really anticipating. So it's led to some sleepless nights, long days, and I'm still in the middle of it. I have until the end of next month to complete it. And then after that, I kind of feel like I'll have a sense of relief and can get back to what I really care about. Not that I don't care about the work, it's just I'm not as motivated about a project whenever the people that I'm working for don't care what I'm doing.
Sure.
I have a passion for what I do and I believe in it. But whenever someone else isn't there, it does kind of suck a little bit of that out of me. It's just I don't like one-sided work. So I always try to work for people that have the same views. Like I'm not going to convince you as a client to restore your windows if you just want to go replace them. If that's what you're going to do, I'll tell you why it's a bad idea, but I'm not going to like convince you so I get the job.
Because it'll be an uphill battle. You'll be pushing a boulder uphill the entire time, probably.
Exactly. So yes, it is very rewarding for me. I am very passionate about it. Probably too passionate to some points. I think
no such thing.
Well, when all I talk about is Windows, even to my wife, I'm sure it gets a little old. I really do enjoy what I do. I look forward to future projects. I think that some of the things that I have coming up are going to restore that joy to me. Because when you take something you're passionate about and turn it into a business, there is obviously some dismay and some things that happen that do take a little bit of that from you. So I'm kind of like trying to overcome that. It's been a hard couple months since I started that project, but once I get through this, I feel like I'll have a renewed sense of purpose. And I'm working with some really cool people in the future on some great things. So that's what I always look forward to that. I'm like, okay, you can just get to this point, everything will be okay.
I think that's great advice. So before we end for today, could you tell people how to follow you on, where to find you on social media, and if they want to contact you for a future job, way in the future at this point, probably?
Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 years in the future. My social media is Saving Old Windows. That's it. Saving Old Windows on Instagram. I have a Facebook page. It's not very active. I basically just share on Instagram and it cross post to Facebook, although I don't know that it's doing that right now. So Instagram is my main form of social media. One day, maybe 10 years from now, I'll have a website. It's something that I'm working on and I have been working on. And then my email is savingoldwindows@gmail.com. You can also find me listed on the Window Preservation Alliance's directory as well. But yeah, usually emails is the best way to get in touch with me, because Instagram, like, those messages get lost quickly. So I feel bad, but I feel like a lot of people have messaged me in the past and I just don't see it. So if you want to reach out to me, email me.
All right. That's great. Well, thanks for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Andrew. You're a fascinating and impressive person, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses, and thank you to our guest today, Andrew Wing.
To continue the conversation, please join us over on Facebook and Instagram at True Tales from Old Houses. You can follow Stacy at Blake Hill House or myself at Daniel Cantor.
And to learn more about everything we've discussed in today's episode or request a transcript, visit truetalesfromoldhouses.com. Until next time.
See you on the mini.